Welcome back in, Sic'Em 365 Radio. Paul Cadlina, Craig Smokey is off today. Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Grayson, we are now just 2 short weeks away from the spring football game for Baylor, and just noticed the other day, and I'll ask you this: I don't know why I'm not enough for the Baylor community to consider out of the transfer portal from FSU, but Corey Wren, running back, wide receiver, they're interested in him. What do they think he can bring to the table if they can get him here in the 254?
Yeah, he's honestly a really interesting one, I would say. And the reason I say that is because he doesn't really fit the mold of what I kind of expected them needing. Just because he's kind of an offensive weapon, not necessarily a big outside receiver, not necessarily a true, every down running back like an Abram Smith. That's just not really his game. But if you watch him, there's a burst about him and an athleticism about him that's just unique. And you need as many offensive weapons as you can possibly have. And in Jeff Grimes' scheme, I just feel like he could be a very nice fit. So, yeah, I think special teams, he's obviously a major plus as well with them losing Treston Ebner. He'd be a nice pickup there, but it's going to be tough, Paul. I mean, this is a guy that a lot of schools want. I think initially many people thought he was going to automatically commit to Oregon because the offensive coordinator moved to Oregon. Dillingham. So I kind of think everyone thought he was going to end up there, but he's been in the portal for over a week and hasn't made a commitment public. So the longer it goes, I think the better Baylor could be as far as having a chance to actually land him. But yeah, it's a really interesting one. And I think he's more of a best available type than he is a true kind of need for what they, are kind of lacking on the depth chart.
Well, Grayson, we do know one transfer they did get. That was Josh White last weekend. You helped to break that. I know that when Smokey talked to Dave Aranda, the clearinghouse stuff was still going through, so Aranda hadn't been able to talk about him specifically just yet. But what kind of a reaction did you kind of gather from the staff in terms of the addition of Josh White? And have you been able to, get any more clarity, or do you have a better idea of just kind of what they are working with potentially as far as open spots in the transfer portal?
Yeah, so I guess the first part of that is kind of just Josh White in general. So I think if you kind of look at their roster, it was looking like they were going to move Matt Jones to the will linebacker spot. And while Matt can play that, I think most people feel his best position is still that Jack linebacker spot. And I also think Mike linebacker actually fits him better as well, but obviously Dylan Doyle is there playing that position currently. So I think this was kind of a no-brainer. You have Dylan Doyle, a guy who is not the most athletic guy you're ever going to see, but his instincts and, the way that he plays the game and his toughness really makes up for that. But to have an elite athlete next to him is something that is really, really special and can make this defense even better. Because Joe Bernard, while fast, we saw that 4.6 40, sub 4.6 40, very fast. Josh White is another level of that. I think Josh White probably will run sub 4.5 at 225 pounds. And because of that, now you have more athleticism on the field. And so I think that excitement is big, but also the fact that Matt Jones can play Jack while also being the backup Will and Mike linebacker provides more depth at the position, a position that they really have a lot of young guys at. So I think this was a no-brainer. Josh White was a top 150 prospect in the 2020 class, a guy who has just this amazing relationship with Dave Aranda. Like the notes that I've posted online, I mean, these two they've been connected since the moment he committed to LSU and signed with LSU, and it just has kept staying that way. And when he visited Baylor and got to talk to Dave Aranda, it became a no-brainer for him. He committed on the spot, Dave Aranda jumping up and down, which is something that, none of us really see a lot. I mean, just the smile, how excited he was. I think it really made Josh go, man, they really want me. And I think Dave definitely made him feel that way. And Josh trusts Dave. And that's a big part of this decision as well. So it's a great pickup culturally. The guy's an absolute monster. I don't think he'll be at Baylor for more than 2 years. I think he's an NFL guy based on the film and everything I've seen. I really think he's going to be a great player at Baylor. Now, as far as the other side of that, the transfer portal side and how many spots they may have, I still think it's fluctuating a little bit because they still have spring football that they're going to go through. They might have more attrition on the roster. And then on the other hand, other schools are having that same problem. So I would say it's still too early to gauge how many spots they have. But what I do know is they have room to add guys. And if the right guys enter the portal, then they will definitely be aggressive and go after them.
Do you get a feeling on spots that they will, or is that something like, we know that they don't have a real clear picture of what the wide receiver lineup is going to be like? Is that one of those things that could be after spring football where you're like, well, they don't like X position. Let's go see what's in the portal right now.
Well, guys, not only is that group young, it's banged up already. And that's part of having a young wide receiving group. They're losing numbers by the day, it seems, at the wide receiver position. So, honestly, that would not surprise me at all. If the right guy enters the portal, I think they definitely need to give it a look. I talked to Craig about this on the Bearcast, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, Paul. There's not been a single year, at least since I've been covering Baylor, where they didn't return at least one receiver who had production. Mm-hmm. And I mean real production, not 200 yards receiving. And this group has just like none of that. Outside of Ben Sims, who's a tight end, there's just not a lot there. And so it's kind of hard for me to imagine that they go into the season feeling okay with the group. So that's why you look at Corey Wren. Corey Wren could play slot receiver, and then you go, okay, maybe they have a little bit more experience there by adding him. But yeah, I think they're still going to be aggressive at that position. I still think the field safety position is very much in the air. I just don't know that they have a guy to replace JT Woods on the roster. I love Devin Neal. I love Christian Morgan, but I feel like they're much better at boundary or star than they are at the field safety position. So I think that's another area they could look. And then obviously cornerback as well. They've definitely been looking at that position. And I think I've mentioned running back before, but I think with the progression of Tate McWilliams, I'm not sure that that's as likely anymore.
So other than that, they're good. It's half the team's a question mark, but.
Yeah, I think the good part about it, though, Craig, is that we're talking about, like, upgrading. Right. You know what I mean? It's not just adding bodies to add bodies like we saw at, Texas Tech last year, where they just had to add transfers to add bodies to the roster. They're only going to take guys if they're really good. And I think, Dave Aranda's track record in the transfer portal definitely speaks to the quality that they bring in out of the portal.
Well, they've only had 3 guys, right, gone. So that, as far as portal, so that like other teams like Texas Tech lost so many they had to, because Baylor hasn't lost guys through just I'm leaving by. It's all been graduation or NFL.
Right. Yeah. And I think that speaks to the culture at Baylor. Guys don't really want to leave Baylor. That's just how it is. Even if guys aren't playing, we've seen guys spend their whole career at Baylor and not play many snaps at all. And I think that just speaks more to the culture that's been built through Matt Rule and then, of course, Dave Aranda now.
Yeah, I was going to say, R.J. Sneed was one exception there, but, it has been pretty steady in that regard. And when I was writing an article about the corners the other day, when they talked, it was kind of alarming to me, Grayson, that, okay, you just slot in Al Walcott, okay, that's good. And then Mark Milton, okay, some experience, but a little bit of a question mark, certainly, like as far as a starting corner week in and week out goes. And then the 3 backups they listed, those guys have like no experience at all, so they're top 5 corners. There's a lot of athleticism and speed and size and things, but I was kind of alarmed by that. So when you mention them as part of the portal, that would make a lot of sense as well, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And they need to develop that room. I think I've talked about a lot in the recruiting segments we've, discussed about just kind of, they're going to have to take cornerbacks in the 2023 class. That's definitely a priority position. But on the flip side, there's a lot of talent on the roster. And I think there's going to be a lot of guys that maybe surprise people at the cornerback position, especially guys like Tevin Williams and Reggie Bush, the true freshman who enrolled early. Those are 2 guys that definitely come to mind. But I also think, if you look kind of beyond that, they have guys who are young. And so they still need to look into the portal, because you're exactly right. Like, if they can find a guy who they feel so confident in Al Walcott, Now, can they find another guy that they feel that confident in?
Right.
And while I love Mark Milton, I don't know if he's a true every down starter. Like, we really haven't seen that throughout his career. He's kind of been a depth piece for their roster a lot. Now, maybe that changes this year. Maybe they feel great about Mark, and maybe he steps in a starting role. That would alleviate a lot of concerns, but I still think experience depth is very, very hard to replace.
Yeah, I mean, it's all three of the backup or the young trio that he mentioned. It's great. They're young, they're talented, they're starting to understand it, but like they've got no experience whatsoever. Chateau Reed and AJ McCarthy. What they have had has been pretty much special teams. If they've even had that, so that was kind of a little bit of a all right. Let's see what happens here. Now, Grayson, what they did add this week, and correct me on the pronunciation here. Matthew Kloffenstein or Kloffenstein, I don't know for sure, commits to Baylor. Arizona tight end. Correct me, please, and tell me more about the addition of him to this Baylor recruiting class.
Yeah, so it's Matthew Kloffenstein,
okay.
out of Horizon. So he's an Arizona guy out of Scottsdale, and it's really interesting. Baylor hasn't had a lot of guys out of Arizona. The last guy I can think of is Drew Dixon, who wasn't even on scholarship. He was a walk-on who was at Air Force and then came over to Baylor. They haven't had a ton of guys from Arizona on the roster, but Hawkins is a great guy. I mean, really, really good dude. And just honestly, he visited March 24th and fell in love with Baylor. The Baylor staff really likes him. They feel like he kind of fits what they need at tight end, especially the receiving part. If you watch his game, he's a physical blocker, but his receiving game is really, really impressive. He had 43 receptions for 562 yards and 10 touchdowns during his junior season. He's right around 6'5", 230 pounds. So great height, good size. And I think if you watch him, he, again, just fits what they need. They have Hawkins Polley already committed. They wanted to take 2 tight ends in this class. And landing a guy of this quality is just massive. I mean, he's a 4-star guy, according to many sites, and I believe he's a 4-star guy just watching him. Great length, solid after the catch, which is something really rare at the tight end position. That really moves you up a level when you can make plays after you catch the football. So I really like him. He had 24 offers: Arizona, Arizona State, Michigan, Michigan State, Tennessee, Wisconsin. Many offers. Really good player, and a guy that I think helps take this Baylor recruiting class to another level. And I mean, they're 6th in the entire nation right now with 9 commits. So I think Baylor's doing a great job evaluating talent while also making sure that the players that they get to commit fit the culture perfectly. And that's how you set up success for the long run instead of just immediate success.
Yeah, Grayson, they had another tight end prospect in from, and I can't remember his name. I was here and filmed his interview with Brian that day. Maybe it was you. But they had another guy in from Arizona. So there was a tight end. I know it wasn't Matthew Kloffenstein, but it looks like they're kind of going in that area, like they're starting to recruit in that area a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
He was in the summer camp. He was one of the guys that, like, I remember the story his mother told. Was like, we were at the Notre Dame camp, and they called us, and we flew down here. So
yeah, no. Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about. I don't even think he ended up getting an offer. But yes, they are looking towards Arizona. I will say Eric Mateos' influence in that Utah kind of west area is really interesting. He's done a really nice job recruiting. You'll see many Utah offers that would have never happened in the past under any coaching staff in the past that Mateos has been offering, and obviously doing a really nice job of that. I mean, they've been able to have some success in Utah, which is not really very common for Baylor to go out that way. And so same with Arizona. Obviously, George Maye is the commit that comes to mind from Utah. So yeah, they're really expanding their recruiting tree a little bit. And it's really interesting because they all fit the same mold culturally. They all fit exactly what Dave Aranda's trying to build at Baylor. And I think that's the most intriguing part, is that they're able to go out of state and just find guys. They're not necessarily going for the number one guy in the state. They're going for a top guy in the state who also fits the culture and loves, the idea of going to Baylor. And then when they get to Baylor, they fall in love with it. And so I think that's been really, really impressive about Dave Aranda and this whole coaching staff, honestly.
Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Grayson, enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
There we go. All right, we'll open in the next couple of segments. At 4:45, we'll talk